What is up, everyone? JD here. I hope you're all doing well today. Today I'm really excited to bring you my full review of the Civivi Conspirator. The Conspirator has a 3.48-inch Nitro V steel blade, 4.63-inch handles. I got the black micarta, but I believe they're other color options, and you can get it with the wood handles, which is also a really nice look. Overall length is a full size 8.11 inches, and Civivi claims that the weight on this guy is 3.82 ounces. So let's grab the scale and have a look. Yep, 3.8. So Civivi and we continue to bring the weight exactly as described. If you're new to my channel, consider subscribing. Don't forget to turn on your notifications to all when you do, and leave a like for this video when it's done. First, we're going to go through some comparison knives. The reason I do this is in case you're familiar with and or own any of these knives but haven't picked up the Conspirator yet. Plus, I think it's nice to get an indication just how big the knife compares to these other knives. And then we'll do some comparable and we'll talk about the knife. First up is going to be the Spyderco Yojimbo 2. The Yojimbo 2 has the DLT Trading exclusive coated 20 CV blade, and as you can see, it's just much smaller than, well, not much. It is smaller than the Conspirator overall in length, and the Yojimbo 2 is very close in size to the Para 3. Next up is going to be my Spyderco Shaman. This one here has the coated S3V blade. I also have the dark matter scales. You can see the Conspirator is actually really close in size to the Shaman, and it also has a similar blade shape, which we're going to get into a little bit later, not right at this moment. Whoa! So the Conspirator will be back out here shortly. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and bring out my crossbar lock knives. First, we're going to bring out the Benchmade Bug Out, a very recognizable knife out there in case you're curious as to the size, and you can just see the Conspirator is just so much bigger. Next up, I like to bring out the SIG K320 made by Hogue. Also, if you're familiar with the Mini Grip or the Doug Ritter, this is very similar in size as well. As you can see, the Conspirator is actually just a little bit longer, but it has a very similar blade shape to the Conspirator, the SIG does. All right, let's go ahead and put these away. And last but not least, we'll bring out the very cheap budget knives. First up is going to be the Kubi Royal. The Royal is under 3 inches in blade length, and as you can see, this will really help you see the size of the Conspirator. Last but not least is going to be the Buck 110. This is a very recognizable knife, and a lot of folks, if you're looking for a budget pocket knife and your concern is making sure it's a USA made knife, that's where these Buck knives come into play. They are manufactured in the US for under $28 still, which is incredible value considering, again, it's made in the US. They've been making these forever, and there's inflation happening as of the time of this video. So that gets all the size comparisons out of the way. What I'd like to do actually first is talk about the knife a little bit, and then we'll talk about some comparable knives just in case you have not picked up this Conspirator. First thing I'd like to say is that I feel like Civivi continues to improve upon the design of the button lock in their in-house. Now, it hasn't been that long since the Conspirator and the Altus have come out, but I feel like it just gets a little bit better each time. This one has a very nice working flipper tab that's very similar to the Cogent, and we'll bring the Cogent back out here in a little bit. But as you can see, it's just a very low profile, and it has really good jimping all the way across, and it's nice because you can really deploy it quite snappy. And one thing that I will say with the button, not the button lock, with the flipper tab that I am noticing is that it does feel like it's a little weak. But it actually isn't that the button lock is weak. I actually believe it's that the spring is stronger on this particular one for whatever reason. I don't know if they're using a different spring, and it could be placebo, fully admit that. But when you let it go to release it, look how well it holds the blade into place. That to me indicates it's good contact and that the spring is a little bit stronger holding on to it. Now, the button lock itself when you look down in there, you can see it is coated. So what I anticipate as that coating wears away, this is going to smooth out, and you're going to notice that it's going to seem to feel snappier as time passes as that coating gets off. And that's going to be because the spring pushing against the blade, it's going to have that coating wear out. It's going to get smoother and smoother. So it's going to feel like it's deploying better, which you would think that the spring would start to get softer. But I really think it just has to do with the little bit of coating they got on the button lock. The one thing that I really like about this is the fuller. The fuller here gives that reverse flick, and it's just very satisfying. And when you really just kind of flick it at a normal speed, it comes out really aggressive. Nice deployment, really great sounds too. Have a listen to this. Takes a minute to find that fuller sometimes for me. Okay, so let's talk about the blade real fast. This is a stone-washed Nitro V blade. Really nice job. I love the fact that they're doing a stone wash on their blades. It looks really good, and it does a nice job kind of holding or hiding, I should say, the wear that you're going to find on knives as you continue to use, or as you use them. For example, I love the way that a coated blade looks brand new, but as you can see, as you use it over time, it's going to leave marks. Now, I personally like that because it shows wear, and I like something that has a little bit of patina, and that's what I'm going to refer to it as on a coated blade. It has that bit of patina. Well, the stone wash does a really nice job of hiding that, but I think that when you start to have that patina effect or the wear marks on the knife, I think it goes really good with the stone wash. The blade is done really nicely. Civivi does a really good job with their edges. I mean, for a budget friendly, this is still budget friendly on my channel. Anything under $100 is still budget friendly. With inflation, the cost of materials, and what they're offering in knives between that $1,500 mark, I'd feel like a cutoff at $50, $75, $80. I feel like it's too low. I feel like you're missing out on knives that are just a hair above that $80 mark. And I know this doesn't do that, but I will say, what you're getting here with Nitro V to me is very comparable to like a 154 cm for performance, for cutting performance, ease of sharpening, that type of stuff. I think it's more on par with 154 cm. I think I have experienced, at least with what Civivi produces with their Nitro V, it seems to perform a little bit better than the 14C28N, which is a steel I love. So if I'm saying that I think this is a little bit better than 14C as far as edge retention and performance and ease of sharpening, that's saying something, because I do love some 14C28N. Don't believe it? Go back and watch the walk and talk episode where I talk about burnout on D2 and wanting to see 14C28N. The fuller's done really nice. The jimping's in a really good spot. You get plenty of cutting edge. It gets you nice and close to the edge. It's back just a little bit, but it's not awful, and the geometry of the blade goes through material so nicely that it's actually quite easy to keep it on path or on target of where you're cutting through with the blade and the material. Action, again, really nice. Civivi does put ceramic bearings in here. Granted, they are hollowed out cages, but that doesn't really bother me too much for getting ceramic bearings on pretty much all their knives that have bearings are ceramic bearings. So I'm really happy about that. You can use this little ramp here to kind of get up. So if you're doing something out gently on the tip, it does help with the control more so than it does here. But I honestly feel like they did a really good job keeping the ergos on this so neutral with just a slight bit of contouring. Really good control. We're going to just go over the pocket clip quickly, because if you're familiar with my channel, you know that I'm not a huge fan of this pocket clip. I wish it was either more like the one that you see Kaiser doing here, where it's flatter, because this here feels a little bit pokey, even with the fact that they are starting to tip it down. I think that if they made it a little bit wider it would actually feel more comfortable and be less noticeable. This is definitely one that I would like, but if I had my personal choice and I got to pick exactly which one that they did, I would actually mimic the one that you see Lynch Northwest do. And I think this is probably the easiest one to stamp out. And I like the solid lines. I like the fact that it's low profile and feels comfortable in hand, and it has the bill that comes up and over and is completely rounded. That would be my preference if they were going to continue to stay with the budget. Now, if they weren't staying with the budget, I'd like to see them just do a full-on stamped out piece of titanium where it has nothing showing and it was reverse mounted. But I think for a maintenance perspective, it is probably just easier to have it where the screws are accessible from the outside. All right, I said I glanced over the pocket clip, and here I am diving into preferences. It is flush mounted, and I think that's a little bit of a miss. I think they could have just cut it down a little bit and have it recessed. Now, the pocket clip functionality is great. Goes deep in pocket. It does not catch. It is thin enough material where the inseam of the pocket just slides right over top of it. Let's talk about the micarta. The micarta is done really nicely. I think a lot of people are saying that it's not as good as some of their other, but I disagree. I think this micarta is really well done. I think what people are missing here is the fact that they chamfered down around on the edges. They came back and chamfered this down to have it smooth, which lends to the ergos, which makes it feel really nice. But this is just as good as some of the other micartas that you're seeing out there. So I'm going to go with QSP first. If you look at QSP is actually just a little bit smoother, and I know it's really hard to tell over camera, but you feel more soft material on the top here and it's more smooth here, and I really love the ergos on that Gannett. Another micarta, which I think this is actually better slightly, is the micarta that you find on the Blade HQ exclusive, at least, version of the thumbhole sheep's foot. And as you can see here, it's very similar. You see a lot of the white there. That white is what sticks up from the micarta that feels soft and fuzzy and gives it that grippy feel. But I think that the micarta on the sheepdog feels just a little bit more textured, but it's still really, really good. I'm really disappointed when I hear people talk about the fact that they don't think it's as nice. I think what it is because it does feel hard here, like a G10 material on the edges, but that was intentional. They chamfered it down to give a better ergonomic experience, and I actually, for one, really appreciate that. Now, last thing I want to talk about on this before we talk about comparables, guys, is going to be that button lock. The button lock is recessed. See if I can get it over here so you can see. It is recessed and barely sticks up, way out of the way for any position. My thumb is right over top of it, and it is just missing in hand, especially when you choke up here into this position, and you really have to push it in far. So a little bit of push. Okay, that's just a little bit. You have to intentionally disengage this for it to come loose. So I really like the button itself. I think the spring tension is really well done. Take into consideration when you're looking at the Cogent, and I've heard creators say this, the Cogent feels snappier, right? It feels like the action's better. Well, the reason for that is because, one, the blade's smaller, right? So the blade is heavier here. It's going to slow all of the action down. And the blade on the Cogent is thinner. Overall, it's thinner. So you have more metal here, and that's what you're feeling. You're not feeling an improvement on the spring or a miss on the spring on the Conspirator. What you're feeling is that you have that really lightweight metal because it is thinner and it is smaller in profile, so the action feels different. You have more steel that you have to have inertia work with you to get it out, so it feels sluggish in comparison to the lighter blade. When you talk about the physics of it, that lighter equates to faster. I mean, I don't know how else to break it down for you. So when it comes to that, I think people are kind of taking that for granted. That's why I think the action is really good, and I think that they may possibly be using a heavier spring. The button doesn't seem like it's all that different when you look at them side by side. It looks like the same button. I would imagine from a manufacturing standpoint, it's probably the same material inside and out. Let's see. Well, no, the liner thickness is exactly the same. So I'm betting the spring and spring tension are the same, but I feel like the action on the Cogent's really good, which is why I think the action on the Conspirator is good. So a little better on the Cogent because the lighter blade feels like the action is more snappy, but I still feel like the button lock works really well on this. Overall, is this a recommendable knife? Absolutely. If you wanted a full-size version of the Cogent, if the Cogent felt like it's a little bit too small, or if the Altus is way too small, this is definitely your jam. If you like a bigger knife that has a larger working blade, awesome steel, really nice ergonomics, this is hard to beat. Having said that, let's say you're looking at this knife because of the price point, because of the Nitro V and the micarta, etc. If you're not looking for a button lock knife, there are some other options out there. Now, a little bit over $100, I'm going to bring the SIG K320 out. I have seen this still for about $127. It has S30V, which is a slightly better performing steel. Really nice edge retention, and really ease of sharpening is really high. It does have polymer handles, but they are bringing out G10 and aluminum. And in my mind, when you start to get into the metal handles, it gives it a more premium feel, long as the coating is done well. This is, again, a USA-made option. If you don't want something quite full of size, you could still go out there with the Cogent. I know I had that out here a little bit ago, but this one here, you know, he's a little bit smaller, and ergos aren't quite as good as the Conspirator in my opinion, but I do like them still. I think the only thing that I've realized now that I've handled the Conspirator is that this little bump out here is a little bit too much for me. It's hard to show it on camera, but it just feels like it's separating my hand too much, and I actually think I like it a little bit better with the neutral ergonomics. So that is an in-house competitor, or same brand competitor, that you could get. If you don't mind spending about $60 extra and you don't mind the FRN, you could absolutely grab an 80-20.5. I think this is a little bit smaller, but also still in that Conspirator space, and I like the ergos on this a little bit better because it's straight back, makes it fit and nestle into the hand a little bit better, and the dimple up here, or the finger guard here, is not as pronounced, so this feels a little bit more comfortable in hand. And then I think the last option I'd probably say, if you're looking in this range and you know your heart's not set on a button lock, but you're trying to get the most for your money, I think for around, I think this is $115, you can get the DLT Trading exclusive. And actually, if you don't care that it's coated, I know that it's less than $110. You can get it with 20 CV. You can get it with a really strong lockback system. And Spyderco does a really good job making their FRN feel premium because they have the bi-directional pattern on it. They give you the option to put the pocket clip wherever you want, and this being a backlock does make it a little bit more ambidextrous, and it has really nice contouring on the FRN, and as you can see here, this compares really nicely in size. So those are the knives that I can think of in my inventory that are really close in price point. I think there's the Begleiter XL from Kaiser out there that's a button lock. There is also a Tucson out there that is a button lock, but I have not been able to find it in stock to get it to determine whether or not I would actually recommend that. Anyway, that is my review of the Civivi Conspirator. Those are the comparison knives to give you an idea for the size, some comparable knives to consider if you haven't picked this up. And if you've already picked it up, let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are about this particular knife. I personally think this is probably my favorite button lock from Civivi. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, again, consider leaving a like for me. I really appreciate all the support from everyone out there that is already subscribed. If you haven't, think about subscribing and think about smashing that notification bell to all. That way you get alerts whenever future content drops, and you can decide which ones you watch. Don't let YouTube tell you what you can and can't watch. I hope you have a fantastic week. Thanks for tuning in with me today, guys. Until next time, peace.